There is a liquid that costs only $2 to make at home. It transforms gray, cracked, and sun-damaged wood by returning it to the condition it was in the day it left the factory. This isn't achieved with paint that simply hides the damage, nor with a stain that fades in 6 months. Instead, it penetrates the grain itself and rebuilds the wood from the inside out. Applying one coat to a rotting fence can make neighbors think you've replaced every single board. One pass on a worn-out deck, and the contractor you almost hired loses a $1,000 job. Furniture that looked ready for the dump suddenly looks like it belongs in a high-end showroom. No sanding is required, no power tools are needed, and no previous experience is necessary. This formula has existed since before World War II, when craftsmen in the 1930s knew it by heart. Cabinet makers passed it down like a closely guarded family secret. Then the wood restoration industry discovered something devastating. If homeowners found out about this liquid, they would never call a contractor again. A $2 bottle that replaces a $900 service simply cannot be allowed to spread. Consequently, they buried it. This wasn't because it failed, but because it worked too well. This is the story of the liquid and the secrets of the wood industry that you would never find anywhere else. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and the bell. This is where we unearth what the industry buried. Now let me take you back to where this formula was born. In 1860, a British inventor named Frederick Walton noticed something strange in his London workshop. A film had formed on the surface of a can of linseed oil that he had left open overnight. That rubbery film was harder than varnish and more flexible than lacquer. Walton realized that the oil was reacting with oxygen in the air and forming a natural polymer. He spent the next 3 years perfecting the process in a factory outside London. By 1863, he had invented linoleum, the first mass-produced floor covering in history, built entirely on one ingredient, linseed oil extracted from the seeds of the flax plant. But the history of this oil goes back much further than Victorian England, 20,000 years more. The flax plant is one of the oldest crops on Earth, cultivated in ancient Mesopotamia for both its fiber and its seed. Egyptian tombs contain linen cloths woven from flax that are still intact after 4,000 years. In ancient China, carpenters discovered that pressing those seeds produced a golden oil that soaked into the wood and hardened over weeks, forming a protective shield. This was the first recorded wood finish in human history. It wasn't polyurethane from a factory or a chemical sealer from a lab. It was oil from a hand-pressed seed rubbed into the wood with a cloth. For centuries across Europe, every cabinet maker, shipbuilder, and furniture maker used linseed oil as the foundation of their trade. Medieval builders mixed it with lead oxide to create boiled linseed oil, which dried harder and faster than the raw form. Cathedral doors in Germany treated with this oil in the 16th century still stand today. British naval vessels coated their decks with linseed oil before crossing the Atlantic, and the wood survived salt water, tropical sun, and cannon fire. Then something happened that changed everything. In the 1950s, the petrochemical industry introduced synthetic alkyd resins. Polyurethane, lacquer, and chemical varnishes flooded the market. These products were faster to apply, glossier to the eye, and much more profitable to manufacture. Producing linseed oil cost pennies per gallon, while synthetic finishes cost dollars and required reapplication every 2 or 3 years. The industry didn't change because the new products were better. They changed because the new products generated recurring revenue, and the old formula quietly vanished from hardware store shelves. Before continuing, I must stop and tell you something important. This information is just the tip of what the industry has hidden from you. They have spent months gathering everything they buried in one place. This includes fire techniques used by military units that are now classified as dangerous. It includes emergency shelters that cost nothing yet outperform $200 tents. There are homemade water filters that engineers tested and couldn't believe actually worked. You'll find natural insect repellents that indigenous tribes perfected over centuries of trial and error. There are food preservation methods that keep meat and vegetables fresh for months without refrigeration or electricity. All of this is inside the complete hidden vault. Only the Fire Art Manual contains 17 techniques that the outdoor industry removed from public training guides. The Book of Lost Rations cookbook has recipes that kept soldiers alive at the front when supply chains completely collapsed. The complete off-grid plan covers water, shelter, power, and food in a single document. The 72-hour blackout checklist guides you exactly on what to do when the power grid goes down. There are over 10 guides in one place with no filler, getting straight to the point. The link is in the description right below this video, but stay here because the science behind this wood formula is about to change the way you see every piece of wood in your home. This is what happens at a molecular level when you apply this liquid to damaged wood. Linseed oil is a triglyceride with an unusually high concentration of alpha-linolenic acid. This is a polyunsaturated fatty acid that reacts with oxygen through a process scientists call oxidation. When you rub the oil into the wood, it doesn't stay on the surface like paint or varnish. It penetrates deep into the cellular structure of the wood itself. Once inside, the fatty acid chains begin to interlock with each other, forming a flexible polymer network that fills every pore. The cross-linking process creates a new material within the wood fibers, a natural resin that expands and contracts with temperature, but repels moisture and resists scratches. A study in the Journal of Coatings Technology confirmed that linseed oil penetrates wood up to 4 times deeper than synthetic polyurethane. Polyurethane sits on the grain like a plastic shell, and a single crack in that shell allows moisture to sneak underneath. That's why polyurethane decks peel, blister, and turn gray in 3 seasons. Linseed oil does the opposite because it becomes part of the wood itself. Now add white vinegar to the mix and something remarkable happens. Vinegar is acetic acid, a natural solvent that cuts through decades of dirt, oxidation, and dead finish without damaging the healthy fibers underneath. While the vinegar removes the gray, the linseed oil floods the newly exposed grain and begins to polymerize immediately. The third ingredient is the key that unlocks the entire formula. Turpentine, a natural solvent distilled from pine resin, thins the linseed oil so it penetrates twice as deep and cures twice as fast. Without turpentine, the oil pools on the surface and takes weeks to harden. With turpentine, it soaks in minutes and begins to harden in hours. The total cost of these 3 ingredients at any hardware store is less than $2 per application. A quart of boiled linseed oil costs about $4. A gallon of white vinegar costs less than $3. A small can of turpentine is around $5 and lasts for months. Now compare that to what a contractor charges for the same result. The national average cost to restore a 200 square foot deck is $980. Labor alone ranges from $600 to $1,400 for a job that takes 1 to 3 days. A single piece of antique furniture costs between $300 and $800 in a restoration shop. And what do most professionals use as the chemical base of their restoration process? They use oil-based products derived from the same chemistry that has existed since 1860. The markup isn't in the skill, the markup is in your ignorance. If you've made it this far, you already know more about wood restoration than 99% of homeowners. Subscribe and share this with someone who is about to waste $1,000 on a contractor. Remember, everything the industry buried is inside the complete vault, and the link is right there in the description. Now stay with me because what comes next is the part they really don't want you to hear. Why isn't this formula sold in every hardware store in America? And why do all contractors pretend it doesn't exist? It's because the wood restoration industry generates nearly $2 billion a year in product sales alone. The overall home restoration market in the United States reached $210 billion in annual revenue. That is the size of the machine that profits from your ignorance about 3 ingredients you can buy for pocket change. Deck staining alone costs homeowners an average of between $900 and $2,700 per project. The industry recommends restoring every 2 to 3 years. That's $1,000 every 3 years for a single deck. Over 20 years of home ownership, that's nearly $7,000 spent on a single wooden platform behind your house. A platform you could maintain yourself for less than $10 total using a formula from before the invention of television. Now multiply that by the 75 million single-family homes in America that have wooden decks, fences, porches, pergolas, furniture, floors, cabinets, trim, window frames, and doors. The amount of money flowing from homeowners to contractors and chemical companies for basic wood maintenance is staggering. It all depends on one thing: keeping you convinced that you cannot do this yourself. But here is the mechanism that keeps this buried. You cannot patent linseed oil because it is a natural product that has existed for thousands of years. You cannot patent vinegar because it is acetic acid, one of the oldest known chemicals to humanity. You cannot patent turpentine because it has been distilled from pine trees since the time of the ancient Greeks. There is no patented molecule, no trade secret, and no intellectual property to protect. What cannot be patented cannot generate licensing fees. What cannot be licensed cannot create exclusive distribution. And what cannot be distributed exclusively cannot build a brand monopoly. The entire business model of the wood restoration industry depends on you believing that wood care requires specialized, brand name, expensive products with names you recognize from TV commercials. These are products that contain the exact same active ingredients that cost pennies at the hardware store, repackaged with a label and a 400% markup. The wood restorer product market alone was valued at $1.9 billion in 2024, dominated by large corporations like 3M, Sherwin-Williams, and Howard Products. Their message is simple and effective. Don't try this at home, trust the professionals, and buy our brand. But the active ingredient in most oil-based wood restoration products is the same drying oil chemistry that Frederick Walton discovered in 1860. They are selling you linseed oil with additives and a logo, charging you 10 to 50 times the cost of the raw material. That isn't innovation. It's a business model built on ensuring you never open a chemistry textbook. Think about what happens when a homeowner searches the internet for how to restore weathered wood. The first page of results is dominated by paid ads from restoration product companies and sponsored articles from home improvement brands. The algorithm itself is shaped by marketing dollars, pushing the $2 solution further and further down the results page. Meanwhile, every home improvement TV show features a segment where the host recommends the latest brand name wood treatment. They never mention that the active chemistry in that $30 bottle costs less than 50 cents to replicate with 3 ingredients from the paint aisle. Suppression isn't a conspiracy in some dark boardroom. It's simply the invisible hand of a market that rewards complexity and punishes simplicity. When the solution is cheap, easy, and non-patentable, no company has an incentive to promote it. So it disappears from public consciousness generation after generation. The cycle continues because every year a new homeowner looks at a gray deck and types into a search engine, "How much does it cost to restore a deck?" The answer they get is always a number with a dollar sign, never a recipe with 3 ingredients. I have to be honest with you about something because this formula isn't magic, and there are limitations you should understand. Raw linseed oil without metallic drying agents can take weeks to fully cure in humid environments, which is why the recipe specifically calls for boiled linseed oil that contains drying catalysts to speed up hardening to 24-48 hours. Linseed oil can also yellow slightly over time, especially on very light woods like maple or birch. But on darker woods like oak, walnut, cedar, and redwood, the warming effect actually enhances the grain beautifully. There is also a critical safety warning that most DIY channels completely ignore. Rags soaked in linseed oil can spontaneously combust if left crumpled in a pile. In 1991, a fire started by linseed oil-soaked rags destroyed One Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia and killed 3 firefighters. Always lay rags out flat to air, dry outdoors, or submerge them in water in a sealed metal container before disposal. This isn't optional, it's a vital safety rule. Now here is exactly how to make and apply this liquid. Step 1. Gather your 3 ingredients at any hardware store. You need 1 part boiled linseed oil, the can must say boiled on the label, 1 part distilled white vinegar, and 1 part turpentine, also called pure gum spirits found in the paint aisle. Step 2. Combine equal parts of all 3 in a glass jar with a tight-fitting lid and shake vigorously for 30 seconds until the mixture emulsifies into a cloudy golden liquid. Step 3. Clean the wood surface with a dry brush to remove loose dirt, cobwebs, and debris. You don't need to sand, strip, or pressure wash. Step 4. Dip a clean cotton rag into the mixture and apply it along the wood grain using firm, even strokes. Work in sections about 2 feet wide so the liquid doesn't dry before you spread it. Step 5. Let the first coat soak in for 10 to 15 minutes, then wipe off any excess with a dry cloth. Step 6. Wait 24 hours and apply a second coat using the same method. The second coat intensifies the color and doubles the protective barrier inside the wood fibers. For a weathered deck, start with the most damaged board so you can see the transformation immediately. The oxidized gray layer will dissolve on contact with the vinegar, and the golden oil will flood the exposed grain in seconds. The before and after on a single board will convince you faster than anything I can say. Within 10 minutes, you'll be doing every board because the result is that spectacular. For indoor furniture, apply it with a softer cloth using lighter pressure in small circular motions. Antique pieces respond especially well because the oil rehydrates wood that has been drying out for decades, bringing dining tables, dressers, bookshelves, and nightstands back to life. For fences, use a wide brush or a paint roller to cover large areas quickly. A fence that looked like it needed replacing will look new by sunset. One batch in a quart jar covers approximately 30 to 40 square feet. For wood floors, apply in thin, even coats with a flat mop, working one section at a time and allowing 24 hours between coats. The floor will develop a warm satin glow that intensifies with each application. The same technique Victorian homeowners used to maintain their floors for generations. A contractor would charge you $600 or more for that same area of coverage on a single deck. A floor restoration company would quote $3 to $7 per square foot, turning a 200-foot room into a $1,400 bill. You just did it for less than $2 in materials and 20 minutes of your time. The finish lasts because linseed oil doesn't sit on the surface waiting to chip. It lives inside the wood. This knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it worked so well that an entire industry had to pretend it never existed. For 20,000 years, humans protected wood with oil from a seed and acid from fermented grain. Your grandparents knew this formula. It was mixed in glass jars and garages in every small town. Then, a generation stopped passing it on because a TV commercial told them there was a more expensive way. But now you know. 3 ingredients, equal parts, 1 jar, 1 rag, 20 minutes. That gray deck could look brand new this very weekend. If this story has changed the way you see the wood in your home, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the history they tried to bury. Protect your future and share this knowledge. The next file will open soon.